Welcome to our seminar today. We're talking about careers in life sciences and what you can achieve out of this very interesting field, which is really growing at the moment. I'm Anu. I'm the host for today. I run a company called Stimulus Coaching, where we guide individuals and businesses into their areas of interest. We coach them one-on-one on achieving their goals. So on our panel today, we have Bernice and Alex. Bernice is a PhD student at the Royal Holloway, and Alex is just finished his BSc at the Imperial College. So he did a BSc in biomedical sciences, and Bernice is doing her PhD in seed technology. So a little bit about the relevance of this industry really now, because it's why do we want to talk about it and what's driving, what can this deliver to us, new science that's coming to us. So you imagine you get dressed in a biosynthetic tracksuit made from fibers that can self-repair, or you drive to the gym in a car that uses biofuels produced by microbes. And after workout, you apply an anti-aging face cream that's suited to your DNA. So really, we're talking about a lot of possibility around personalization. So getting nutrients and clothing that suit our DNA, getting seeds that suit soil type, and it's going to drastically change how the world operates today. And of course, that will bring its own challenges and complexities, but that's the scope of action that's possible within this industry. So if I can ask you, Bernice, now in terms of what you see as a potential from this industry and why you chose to study this subject.
Well, I chose to go into the particularly agricultural industry, and what motivated me most was the fact that it's so that I could make such a profound impact on other people in the world, and that's what I really want from it, even if my project is so niche.
And tell us a bit more about your project, your thesis.
My project is on beneficial microbes in crop seed coating. So basically, you have like on crop seeds, you put a coating that has nutrients that help the plant grow once they're planted, and on top of that, I personally am looking at putting beneficial microbes into the seed coating, and making it more efficient, so that once the seed is planted and the plant grows through the seed, it will have it'll have a symbiotic relationship with the beneficial microbes that I've put on the coating of the seed, and it helps increase yield of crops to help feed more people and be more efficient with land use and water use by producing more efficient crops.
Wonderful. Okay. So, and Alex, so why did you choose this field of study and where do you want to go with it?
So I suppose in contrast to Bernice, I'm focusing more on the medical aspect of biology. And it's something that I've always been interested in, but really I found that I was more interested in the science behind clinical medicine. So actually all of the work that goes into making these big discoveries, identifying new therapeutic targets was what I was really interested in. And I think, my degree has kind of allowed me to explore a number of areas within the field of biomedicine. So it's kind of morphed into more of a focus for me on nanomedicine towards the end. And you mentioned the Industrial Revolution in terms of big data and software. However, I think for me, I've also been looking at kind of nanotechnology as it's been coined as a kind of new industrial revolution. And within medicine, it's really taken off in the last few years, our understanding of how these particles are interacting with the body and how we can exploit these kind of quantum effects almost to enhance their therapeutic efficacy. So that's been my major interest at the moment. Okay. And I think it's just a really fulfilling career if you want to help people. So.
Yes, it is. And also it's an unbelievably large area of study. So there's like about 30 plus branches of life sciences, right from biochemistry, bioinformatics, biomechanics, biophysics, cell biology, molecular biology, immunology, neuroscience is huge, really, the scope of what's going on here, and the impact that it can create in the world is also giving a huge variety of study, I guess, to the students who can choose from various career options, research to being a clinician, to being a professor, to being an immunologist or toxicologist or whatever, cryogenetist. There's also a term like that. So it's huge, and I think the industry is just beginning to on its growth path. So it's not going to be the most simplest evolution. There's a lot of challenges as well, but at the same time, the opportunity it offers is immense. Because we're talking about changing genetics, we're talking about new cellular formations, uh, we're talking about intersection with other sciences, we're talking about data science combined with this. So the possibilities are immense, but also there's ethical issues, regulatory issues. There's also all sorts of commercialization. So it's not going to be easy to commercialize this, and because we're going to be ending up competing with some of the existing generic products in the market. So there's going to be, of course, challenges from the existing industry leaders. I don't know if you've come across any kind of a mentality of actually this is not good for us, either of you, and where the industry doesn't want to actually, it might harm their interests initially to allow so much progress. Any comments on that from either?
I mean, yes, so definitely. My dissertation actually, interestingly, was on the impact that particularly plastic nanomaterials that are being produced and introduced into products can have on the human body. So I was particularly interested in kind of inhalation of, you mentioned synthetic fibers in clothing, and smart materials, even within sort of cosmetics and face creams. There's actually a lot of detrimental effects that these things can have, and you can find that out through toxicological work. But actually, if you're considering these sorts of materials in terms of, say, carrying drugs deep into the lung to enhance their delivery, you need to know the kind of toxicology around that. And that can in turn inform actually manufacturers and policymakers in terms of how they want to regulate production and exposure to these materials in the workplace, in the environment, and the impact that's going to have on human health. So it's a rapidly growing field, nanotechnology. Actually, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of regulating exposure and use at the consumer end.
Yeah, thank you. And Bernice, any thoughts on the agricultural side of things, where you're sort of disrupting the industry and it might not always be welcome?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, genetically modified plants are a very controversial topic, especially in crop food production. So when I was choosing my PhD, I was looking at different projects, and it would have been really interesting to look at genetically modified plants because you can do so much more, and you can research such interesting things. But at the end of it, you can't produce anything that people can use because it's illegal in most countries to consume genetically modified plants, and that's probably the most controversial thing that impacts people's health and that people are worried about in the agricultural industry. Actually, on top of that, my part of my project is to look at seed coatings, right? So the whole point of putting beneficial microbes into the seed coatings is to bring back the natural symbiotic relationship that occurs in plants to improve them, rather than looking at products that we've produced, so like using plastics and things in it, and pesticides and stuff that could be harmful to us and our ecosystem and everything. So that's also part of it.
Sure. Okay, so in terms of the course structure at the undergraduate level, Alex, so how was your course sort of structured? Did you first get into the basics of biology, or did you build on existing knowledge? How did it get
So
started?
it's a bit of both. I think when you're at school deciding on what you want to do, you obviously align the topics and your subjects accordingly. For me, I entered into this degree with kind of a strong background in biology and chemistry. with a very limited knowledge of of physics, the relevant physics anyway. When you start the degree, there's a massive effort to kind of get everyone on the same page. So you do a lot of recap, but you also find out where actually the teaching that you've received at school might be out of date. It could be too generic, and you find there's a lot of ambiguity, and that's why there's research. That's why we're here. So we started off with the very basics of how the body responds to disease, and the anatomy that is kind of necessary to understand in order to kind of join all of these complex systems together. And we looked at kind of integrative systems that affect the whole body, like the nervous system, the endocrine system, hormones, and so on. But we also looked at specifics in terms of, the cardiovascular side of things, the liver, and the functions of each and every part of the body. So once you've got that complete understanding of, I suppose, how the pipes work, you can move on to kind of research the specifics of how the microbiology of the cells can change. It can actually be incredibly plastic compared to what you might have read in the textbooks at school. And then, of course, they give you a bit more free rein as you go into the laboratory environment to investigate and plan your own experiments. And eventually that culminates in a dissertation, which for me, it started out as a laboratory exercise. However, because of COVID-19, that turned into a review, and the kind of so I've had to look at all of the literature across the field of nanotechnology as it relates to medicine to kind of come up with a thesis sort of conclusion as to the efficacy of certain materials, particularly within sort of drug delivery. Sure. And so that's kind of the progression of your independence.
How much time did you spend on research? Was it half the course on research and getting your hands into the material?
So it's kind of it's changed. My course was initially very content heavy. We learned everything in a lot of depth in terms of the biochemistry, the anatomy. Whereas now I think they've changed the course to actually accommodate a lot more kind of laboratory apprenticeship type training. And it's always a balance because it's such a multidisciplinary topic that you need to really be able to translate the findings from basic research into real world applications.
Yeah. So Bernice, in terms of your experience at the undergraduate level, how much research time did you have, and what were the subjects that were very critical to know?
Well, I mean, in some ways it depends how you look at it, because every assignment you have is all research. You have to do it all yourself. That's why, I mean, it's also independent. But in terms of generating new knowledge and finding out like new things in that term, like that's, I suppose, really what research means in science, is you don't do much in your undergrad because they don't trust you with it so much and you don't have quite as much time. But then at the end you do tend to do a dissertation, which is pretty much like, sometimes you can come up with new science on your own and you can get it published, but that's a bit rare. I also personally did an internship in middle summer of my undergraduate degree, and that's where I probably learned the most about research, and that's something I would recommend to people who are in that sort of stage of first or second year of their undergraduate degree if they want to go into research, because you need to pick up this, you need all the skills you learn in your undergrad, but then you need a little bit more before you go into a PhD. Most people go and do a master's first, and that's where you get those more refined research skills.
Yeah, I guess the practical experience helps to clarify your own interests and what excites
definitely
about the whole thing. Yeah. And so what skills do you think were important to you being a researcher?
At which level? Do you mean just in general up to this point for my PhD?
After you sort of finished your undergrad and then you actually formally began to do more research work, then what's the sort of skill sets that are important?
So So I've gone into doing research in like wet lab research, so not dry. So I need lab experience, and I had a lot of lab experience from my course. That would be something to look at in undergrad courses if you're interested in it. And it gets much more interesting once you leave school and you go and start your degree. I hated lab work at school, And then on top of that, the internship lab work was even more beneficial because they give you actual independence, and you have to work alone. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to get comfortable with it. And that's the main skills I learned to for my PhD.
Yeah, and I also meant more generically in terms of being organized and being, having a scientific investigative mindset and those sort of things, really having a bit of curiosity. So
Yeah, I suppose the most important thing is interest and curiosity. I think you need all the skills to do it. If you're going to go and do a 3 or 4 year degree where you end up writing maybe 80 or 100,000 words, you've got to be interested. Otherwise, you're going to give up halfway through.
okay, and Alex, you talked about nanotechnology and that kind of area that you're interested in. So, how did you know you wanted to grow your career in that sort of area?
I think it's something that I became aware of on the course. We received a lot of lectures on every topic you can imagine, and I think one of the good things about the discipline is that we've actually had the opportunity to pick and choose a lot of modules and to decide where our interests lie, and to actually to pursue that. Something that requires a really multidisciplinary approach between materials scientists, chemists, toxicologists, biomedical scientists, clinicians. So if you think that you've got a kind of a broad interest and skill set, then it's something that you just you want to get your teeth into straight away. Yeah.
And what sort of role are you looking for? You want to be a researcher, or I don't know what kind of nomenclature exists. So what is it that you're after?
Yeah, so for me, I think at the moment I'm really interested in research. So I'm looking to pursue a PhD as well, like Denise. Yeah. I've actually elected to take the route, take the master's route to gain some more skills and some deeper knowledge, particularly within the area of immunology and nanomaterials.
Higher education, it seems, is quite important in this field. You really need to go very deep into your subjects to be able to make an impact, isn't it? It seems like a master's is at least required, if not a PhD.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you go into a PhD, you're naturally going to spend a lot of time in your first year, as Bernice will say as well, writing reviews, finding out about the topic, going through all the relevant training and talking to your supervisors. Initially, what they're looking for is just the skill set, the laboratory experience, some independence, the ability to learn, and a keenness to actually find out more about the topic and finish the project. So I think for me, this is it was a chance to actually learn something about specifically immunology, because I think that's something that I could have a strong angle on, because you're going to need a lot of team members from all different disciplines. And I think you want to feel like you're an expert on something. And if you come out of a master's with a really in-depth knowledge of certain aspects of a field, then you're going to be a really valuable member to a team. So for me, that's why I've gone via that route.
Sure. And where could you work? Could you work with research institutions, so pharma companies, research laboratories?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the benefits of doing any kind of STEM subjects is that you're dealing with data and analysis and working in teams. So there's a lot of transferable skills. You can go on to do anything. I've got friends who have done complete U-turns and ended up in finance and banking, and it's always the case. But then I think the majority of people that enter into these degrees are actually going to want to go on, initially at least, into academia. Which sounds really, really boring, especially if you're a school student. You don't want to go into more academia, but actually what it is just the opportunity to conduct your own research within a team. Initially, you'll start out as a PhD student, then you'll go on to become a postdoc, and then you'll climb up the ladder, and eventually you can become a principal investigator who runs the lab group and has a say on the direction of the research. And increasingly, as you go along, you'll actually be teaching. You can go into industry as well. You can go into pharma.
Bernice, since you belong to the academia world already, what has been your experience in terms of, the people you work with, the kind of interactions you have, the learning experience? So how has it been for you?
I suppose it's like I basically I go, when I go in, I sit in an office with 8 other people, and we're all in a lab together. There are about 4 of us are PhD students. They're older than me. They're in their like 3rd or 4th year. And then there's a couple of postdocs, and then my 2 supervisors who have their own separate offices because they have a lot more important work to do. And basically it's very much a collaborative environment to be in, and you have the option of working in a team, and everyone's there for each other, and you'll help each other out in each other's research and do bits for each other in the lab and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But also it is very independent, and all the learning comes from yourself. They're not going to teach you anything. Your supervisors don't necessarily know anything really about what you're doing either. They do know a lot, and it helps, and normally the projects come out of that. They think of something that they want to know as well. But yeah, it's both a teamwork environment and also very independent. Yeah. Well, my project is actually funded by a company called Incotech, a Dutch company. So I'm both looking for answers to questions that I and my supervisors have thought of, for the sake of research, I suppose, in itself. So I'm trying to answer questions for this company, and they want so they can use it as a product for themselves.
Okay, and so coming back to advice for students who want to make a career in this field, they need to probably do very well in biology and chemistry in school, and then possibly math or physics. So I think the 3 A's are required at least, isn't it? So biology.
Yeah, definitely biology. I mean, yeah, definitely biology. You have to be interested and you have to be good at it. But I don't think I was very good at chemistry at school. I did have to, you have to do it to get into university for your undergraduate. They require it, but I wasn't very good at it, and then I didn't stick with it for throughout my undergrad. I chose things a bit like further away from chemistry and maths. So yeah, you need it at that level, but you don't necessarily have to be really good at all of these different things.
No. So it's an A in biology and then possibly an A in chemistry or math or physics. Yeah, Alex, isn't that?
It tends to be.
Yeah, it can be. It depends where you go, really. Yeah, you definitely need biology if you're interested in any kind of medical science, from my point of view. Chemistry is a really, really important skill if you can pick it up. You don't have to be particularly strong at school. However, I think a lot of the basics are actually really useful when you start applying them. I mean, in my degree, I went a whole year where I didn't need to touch chemistry. I'll be completely honest. But I just found it really interesting to actually find out how the molecules are interacting, and to have something more to say when you're writing. It gives you a lot more freedom, and you just don't feel so limited. So it's all about pursuing your interests, and physics is often a requirement. I'm not particularly sure why. It wasn't a requirement for me when I got into Imperial.
You can get into all sorts of stuff with biology, like you said at the beginning, right? The life sciences are so broad. You could end up doing biology and psychology together, and psychology maybe isn't typically one you'd put with it. You'd probably say like you want maths, chemistry, and biology if your high level or your A levels, right? But if you're interested in something to do with biology, you want to do the two, and you find that one course that works for you, and that's your interest, and that's perfect. We both took IB, so we obviously would also have had 3 standard level subjects we took as well. I took a standard level English class, and I'm not particularly good at English, but I did find that of all things, my writing ability was very helpful when in my undergraduate degree, whereas most people around me had done the 3 subjects in their A levels, maths, chemistry, biology. I had that extra bit of writing experience that people don't normally tell you is important or helpful for science, but I would personally say that helped me stand out a little bit more, was my writing ability. Even though I'm not very good at it, like it helped to have the experience.
Massive.
That's great.
Yeah,
right. And how about mathematical skills? How much of calculus, etc., do you really need in your research papers, etc.? How much of math is there?
I mean, in your undergrad, there isn't much. There's stats. There's a lot of stats in biology if you want to do stats. So I mean, yeah, to come out with results that matter, you need to analyze them. So you need stats. I'm terrible at stats. I can't really do them. I find it really difficult. But when it gets to it, you learn the stats you need to learn, and it's easier when you're in university, because you're answering a question, you're using it to answer a question that you want to find out. So you make a bit more of an effort and you do understand it better. And then on top of that, when you go in to do a PhD or a master's in research, you're researching what you want to research. So you get to choose, like, if I understand this, if I want to make this point, I need to use this maths to do it. And if I can't do that maths, I'm not going to make that point, and it's not going to go down that route. So it's not a problem if you don't like maths or if you're not good at it. But if you like, whatever you do learn or want to learn is how you angle your research. So that's what I'd say about maths.
Yeah, I guess, but we can't escape data anymore. I think everything is about collecting, tabulating, analyzing data, and then coming to conclusions. So, I think some element of it is always there.
And like you need the understanding.
Yeah. Alex, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just make the point, obviously, that whilst you can get away with it and just apply maths to suit your interests and your research, I think that I wouldn't shy away from it at school. I think you were trying to make the point to people who are entering their degree. Actually, as difficult as it may be, I really had to wrestle with maths to become good at it. You can actually, you can crack it. School, the ceiling isn't high enough at school to bar anybody from doing well. Your understanding of it really does help you interpret a lot of things, especially data. If you can present data really beautifully, and a chimpanzee can understand it, but really you want to be able to manipulate it yourself. You want to be able to really find out what's beneath the surface.
If you can tell a story around the data, then actually you just come to the final destination where people understand what you've done and what the relevance of your work is. So I
Selling
think
it is the biggest challenge, actually, because you've got to, one of the biggest hurdles if you're a researcher is getting a grant. And this is being told to me. I haven't written one yet, but I do know how they work and I know the whole process. And if you can't persuade somebody that your research is the most important thing from sliced bread, then you're not going to get funding, because and being a good writer is the best way to convince people of your research, and also to just convey your ideas with clarity.
And publish your results at the end.
Yeah, I think all very valid points, and thank you so much for bringing them to this discussion. I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you so much for joining me today.